Welcome, Betty, to near zero emission natural gas heavy duty engines meeting California's air quality and climate protection goals. This is a free webinar hosted by Southern California Gas Company, supported by the Coalition for Clean Air and the South Coast Air Quality Management District. This webinar is one of a continuing series of events focusing on highlighting the role that natural gas and natural gas fuel technologies can play as a cleaner alternative fuel. My name is Cliff Gladstein. I'm the president of Gladstein Neanderson Associates, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. During today's live event, you will learn about the development of natural gas engine technology. With emissions so low that the functional equivalent of vehicles powered by batteries when filled with electricity from natural gas power plants. These near zero emission natural gas engine technologies have already found a substantial foothold in the market and poised to achieve the emission reductions necessary to enable California to attain its air quality and climate protection objectives. For today's agenda, I'll set the stage for our discussion by providing an overview on some recent research that was conducted by my firm on the development of highly efficient near zero emission natural gas heavy duty engine technologies and the role that these technologies may be able to play in helping California achieve its environmental objectives. Next, you will hear from three expert speakers. Our first speaker is Sato, the Deputy Executive Officer for Science and Technology Advancement at the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Matt discussed Southern California's air quality issues, production goals, and the AQMD's current research and development efforts to make natural gas truck engine technology cleaner and more efficient. Followed by Mark Walls, a senior research engineer and Southwest Research at the Southwest Research Institute. We'll discuss the specific technologies that are being developed to further improve the efficiency of natural gas engines. May be followed by Stephen Pucha, Director of Project Management and Planning at Cumming Westport, who will tout the current status, expanding availability of near zero NOx heavy natural gas engines and the other products that his company is working on. After all four presentations, we'll have a moderated question and answer session. I'll provide you with some additional information about how to get your questions submitted in a moment. Before we start, there's just a couple things to keep in mind as we go through today's webinar. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar. Send your questions to all panelists using the Q&A box located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Hope everybody can see that. If possible, please indicate if you are directing the question to a particular panelist. If you need technical assistance during the webinar or having trouble submitting your questions, don't hesitate to email or call Charlotte Medlock. You see her information down there on the lower right-hand corner of the slide. We have her email address and her phone number, and she'll be able to provide you with technical support. It's also important to let everybody know the speaker presentations and a full recording of today's webinar are available for download in the coming weeks. We will email this link these items to all of the participants who registered for this webinar, actually whether or not you actually attended. Anybody who RSVP'd, we will send the link for this webinar where you'll be able to enjoy it time and time again. At the very end of the webinar, once we conclude, please, if you wouldn't mind filling out a very, very brief 30-second survey. We really appreciate your feedback As I said, this is an ongoing webinar series, and we're looking to constantly improve the quality of the webinars that we are presenting to you. Without further ado, we can get started. Hand me the ball. I'm here to discuss some of the research that my company has done and that we've completed that tells what we think is a compelling story of technologies that could help the state meet its air quality and climate protection objectives. In order to really tell this tale, however, we need to review the challenges that California faces. For years, California has been a leader in the environmental movement, almost always pushing standards and protections further than those that are required by the federal government. In air quality, California has adopted the most aggressive and successful emission control measures in the nation. On energy policy, California has been at the forefront of advanced energy efficiency standards and the promotion of renewable resources. Now, today, California has also positioned itself to be a leader in the efforts to address climate change. There are two policies that are driving California's regulations on air quality and climate protection. First, there's the Federal Clean Air Act. Federal law has set health-based standards for certain criteria air pollutants. And the two criteria air pollutants that influence our air quality most today are reducing ozone and particulate matter. The second is the California climate change initiatives. This is the second policy that's driving environmental policy in California is our climate change initiatives led by AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, which targets reducing greenhouse gases by 20% below 1990 levels by 2020, and by California's former governor's executive order to reduce GHG emissions to 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. It's also important to note that currently state agencies are planning or thinking about calling for setting a midterm goal before 2050, probably a goal by about 2035 that would reduce GHG emissions 20 to 30% below 1990 levels by 2030. Improving air quality and reducing climate-altering emissions are parallel policies being pursued by the state of California. One would think that the pursuit of one objective would help in the pursuit of the other, and that quality regulators are trying to coordinate the two. This is in fact happening, the coordination is happening, but unfortunately, current air quality and climate protection plans miss crucial deadlines for the achievement of clean air for the most impacted California air basins, and that's represented by this slide. It represents all the existing and planned measures to achieve both air quality and climate protection objectives in the state of California. These large blue dots down here on the bottom of the slide, NOx emission targets that we need to attain in order to meet the existing standards for ozone in our atmosphere. This large green dot represents the target. These blue dots are for the South Coast Air Quality Air Basin, and this green right here is for the San Joaquin Valley. This red line represents the targeted emission reductions for greenhouse gases out to 2050, and this blue line represents the trajectory of NOx emission reductions when you take into account all the GHG and NOx reduction goals for the South Coast. And green line represents the reduction trajectory for the San Joaquin Basin, and you can see that there is a disconnect. That given all current plans, we will not meet attainment for any of the existing standards that are currently in place, and won't, like in the case of the upcoming standard that is going to be for NOx in the South Coast, we actually won't be, that we're supposed to meet in 2023. It looks like we wouldn't be meeting that until close to 2040. So neither current ozone or greenhouse reduction plans have nearly enough emission reductions to meet these critically important attained deadlines. We need far more reductions that are currently called for, and these reductions must come from the heavy-duty sector. As my old mentor, Carl Moyer, taught me way back in the 1990s, he said, "It's the trucks, stupid." Or, as we would slightly modify Carl's axiom today, it's the heavy-duty sector, stupid. Whereas the greenhouse gas perspective, automobiles are a major source. For ozone reduction purposes, the light-duty sector has mostly already been addressed. And you can see when you look at the South Coast Air Quality Management District, it's of the top 10 sources of summer NOx, it's the 10th. It shows that heavy-duty engines, diesel engines, are the biggest source of pollution in both the South Coast Air Quality Management District and in the San Joaquin Valley. More than 90% of the current NOx inventory in Southern California comes from combustion engines that power motor vehicles, ocean-going vessels, and locomotives. Thus, for both areas, the only way for either to have a chance of meeting air quality standards is for heavy-duty engines to get much cleaner, much faster. Now the good news. These sources of emissions can be part of the solution. Many sources have high potential for emission reductions if they were converted to natural gas. What converting heavy-duty engines to natural gas achieve in terms of additional emission reductions? Everybody on this call is aware of the dramatic changes that have taken place in the energy sector over the last few years. And the cost of natural gas has led to virtually every single manufacturer of heavy-duty engines to shift their focus from diesel to natural gas. Why is this the case? Because their customers are demanding natural gas alternatives to the dirty, more expensive diesel fuel that they're currently compelled to use. It's all about economics. It's exciting for many, many reasons, but the one that I'm going to focus on this afternoon, and which was the subject of a report that we recently produced, natural gas engines are on a developmental trajectory to be 90% cleaner than the current standard for heavy-duty engines at the end of this decade. I mean, this helps illustrate how clean heavy-duty natural gas engines are headed. Natural gas engines are currently being worked on in the lab to emit about 0.2 grams of NOx per brake horsepower hour. How clean is that? It's the same amount of NOx to be emitted by today's cleanest natural gas power plant producing electricity for a battery-powered truck of comparable size. This is possible. Research, which was sponsored by Southern California Gas Company, documents all of the technologies, many of which were off the shelf, that are now being applied to heavy-duty natural gas engines to enable them to meet these exciting new levels of ultra-low, near-zero emission technologies. Any of these technologies are represented on this slide. We all know that natural gas is inherently cleaner than diesel or gasoline as a transportation fuel. To get clean as natural gas, particularly in diesel engines, all kinds of emission control technologies have had to be developed over the last 20 years. But what happens when makers begin to apply these technologies to our inherently cleaner natural gas engines, as well as begin to design engines from the engine block up to take advantage of the combustion characteristics of natural gas. The technologies that are being developed are essentially grouped in 5 major categories, or like what we call pathways, if you will, to achieve the emission reductions to meet these important health-based air quality standards. We group them in these 5 areas. There's advanced engines, advanced after treatment, increased hybridization of these engines, better vehicle integration, primarily focused on efficiency improvement, and enhanced use of different gases like renewable gas, biogas, biomethane, and increasing the proportion of hydrogen in natural gas supply, which is something that we've actually been talking about for about 20 years as a method to stimulate the hydrogen highway. All of the different technologies that are currently being worked on that are going to yield these near zero emission heavy-duty natural gas engines. Each will help achieve the dramatic reductions that are so desperately needed. What research has found is that these technologies are already being applied to natural gas engines with dramatic results, some of which you're going to hear about in the presentations that follow. What engine manufacturers have told us is that they now need to commercialize these new technologies. There has to be a demand for these new technologies. California has been a leader in innovating air quality and climate protection policies, and it can continue to do so through the promulgation and implementation of policies to encourage the rapid development and proliferation of these near zero emission heavy duty natural gas technologies that we so desperately need. Support public policy would dramatically help to accelerate the development and deployment timelines that we've that are suggested here, and which will be talked about by my colleagues a little bit later on. Some policies include direct funding for research, development, and demonstration of what we like to call pathway technologies to push emission reductions faster and further. The development of policies and incentives to encourage early demonstration projects. The promulgation, very important, of performance-based standards. They enable all of these technologies to participate. The implementation, which the ARB actually did very recently, of optional low emission standards to encourage engine manufacturers to develop to these standards, and the continued use of incentives for early commercialization and deployment. All this discussion is available in a report that was that I referenced earlier, that was produced by my firm. You can have access to this report if you and can read the whole thing through the website that you see on your page before you. And without further ado, hand off to our next presenter, who is Matt Miyasato, the Deputy Executive Officer for Science and Technology Advancement at the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Dr. Miyasato's principal duties are to identify and further develop the commercialization of clean technologies, develop and coordinate mobile source regulations, to conduct monitoring, source testing, and laboratory analysis of technologies. Today, Matt is going to discuss the challenges the South Coast Air Quality Management District faces in meeting its emission reduction targets, as discussed some of the technologies that have been developed under his watch and the watch of his predecessors. Matt?
So thank you, Cliff. I appreciate the introduction. I also want to thank SoCalGas for inviting us to participate in this webinar. And what I'd like to do is set the context in terms of the Southern California region and where we see some promising technologies, but also technologies that need to be proven out not only in the laboratory, as Cliff was suggesting, but also on the road. To give some historical perspective, the South Coast Basin, we are home to, unfortunately, the worst air quality in the nation. This is a AQR ozone isopleph map that shows, you see those kind of two big maroon dots out there in the Inland Empire in San Bernardino and the Riverside counties. And that is that there's very unhealthy air quality to everyone exposed to that region, as well as in the upper county near Santa Clarita. But the other recognition is that we've got the basin covered in that orange color, which is signified as USG. That's unhealthy for sensitive groups. And there are children, those with developing respiratory systems, as well as the elderly, or those that suffer from asthma. And so, that's a large portion of our population. And so it is really a health issue that we're trying to combat here to meet healthful air quality for the entirety of the region, which, by the way, is about 44% of the state's population. I mentioned, if you look at all the quote-unquote bad actors, and I don't have any really good quotes from Carl Moyer, but I think Cliff mentioned it appropriately, it's really these conventional heavy-duty vehicles and technologies that are cause of copious amounts of NOx emissions and the potential also for air toxics with diesel particulate. But if you look at the stacked bar chart in terms of the NOx sources, you can see duty trucks and off-road equipment are at the top of that list. In order to come in compliance with the federal standards for healthful air quality, we've got to reduce those down to the dash lines, 2023 and 2032. And it turns out to be about a 70 to 90% reduction for all these different categories if we have any hope of meeting those federal standards and achieving clean air. What we've done in the past is we've looked at those vectors and those vocations. We developed ahead of schedule, so this is the past natural gas heavy-duty engine development work that we worked with the Department of Energy, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and the company listed here, Cummins Westport and Westport Innovations, as well as the Energy Commission and SoCalGas, to look at developing these newer technologies. So these were implemented back in the early 2000s, the mid-2000s. We're able to achieve commercialization of these cleaner natural gas engines schedule. So the first one, the 8.9 liter, was certified in 2007, and followed by the 15-liter Westport Innovation engine in 2010. And due to the commercialization of those technologies, we've had some pretty significant success stories, we believe, in terms of converting fleets over to using the cleaner technology. So LAMTA, the third largest transit district in the nation, converted all of their buses to natural gas back in 2011. We had a large population of school buses that were converted to natural gas, as well as haulers. 34% of the fleet here in the South Coast uses natural gas for these different hauler applications. Currently also supporting the development of engine different sizes. So we have support for the Cummins Westport 12-liter engine. It was certified at 0.15 gram per horsepower NOx. Launched just last year. And then also supporting the Doosan engine that Mark will talk about, and Stephen will probably talk about the 12-liter engine. But the point that we're looking at different vocations. So we did the 8.9-liter, 15-liter, now we're looking at the 11 and the 12 liters. And the reason we're looking at these different vocations is because we're finding as we look at different emissions profiles for duty cycles, we're seeing that the different fuels and technologies actually have some benefits depending on their use. So, for example, we did an emission study looking at different fuels, so natural gas and diesel, in different applications, so school buses, transit, haulers, and drayage cycles. And what I want to do is highlight just a couple of those different duty cycles and the results that we had. Different vocations, so this is a refuse application and a drayage application. The blue bar is NOx in grams per mile for the natural gas technologies, and the red are the diesel technologies in those same vocations. So again, these are run on a chassis dynamometer with these specific duty cycles. We found that the natural gas had about 3 to 4 times lower NOx emissions rate. Drayage application, drayage, as you may know, has different duty ranges, so near dock, local, and regional, which would be the litter haul, And again, we're seeing significant emissions reductions with the natural gas offering, and that's due to the SCR not coming up to temperature on the near dock and the local low cycles. So there is still a potential for choosing the right technology for the right application, and in this case, natural gas seems to be a good fit for these different vocations. As we look to the future, Cliff mentioned there's just a huge movement due to the market drivers and the economics for natural gas for fleets to convert over because of the financial gain. So what we'd like to do is get a twofer, so you're getting emissions benefits as well as a market driver. But how do we get the emissions to be power plant equivalent, or as Cliff mentioned, equivalent to an electric vehicle? And so based on relations that we've done, in order to get from a 0.2 gram standard, the 2010 standard, down to where we need to be a near zero or a power plant equivalent, you've got to reduce it by an order of magnitude. And I'm just throwing up some numbers here to show kind of the mix of different emissions rates that we looked at. So if you look at the first, the EV combined cycle, this is an emissions rate for a very clean combined cycle natural gas power plant, would give an equivalent tailpipe emissions of a 0.03 grams per brake horsepower NOx. If you look at simple cycles such as a peaker unit, it gives about a 0.04 gram NOx emissions. But if we look at our grid in the basin, so the energy consumption versus the NOx emissions for our region as a total, it's about 0.01. So what our grid would likely provide in terms of an electric vehicle equivalent. That's why we're saying this 0.02 is about the right order of magnitude in order to capture these different variations on how you would point to an equivalent or near zero power plant equivalent emissions rate. So that number, that 0.02 number, is what we're using as we're going forward and to get engines down to that level. And so, done at the South Coast in partnership with the Energy Commission, Southern California Gas, and also the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, we're looking at the next generation of natural gas engines that are targeting that 0.02 gram brake horsepower NOx level. We recently awarded about $3.5 million to each of these entities, Cummins to develop a 15-liter offering, and then Cummins Westport to work on their 8.9-liter offering. And that recently an award that was made at the end of 2013. So we're hopeful that those engines will become commercial later, because we need those emissions benefits, but also to test those in those duty cycles, in particular goods movements where we'd like to see those applied. So I'll end and conclude with these major takeaways. We here at the South Coast need some emission solutions now in order to provide healthful air quality to the over 17 million residents in the region. We're seeing that heavy-duty natural gas engines are being fleets are being converted over to that just because of the market dynamics. We'd like to see that we get emissions benefits as well. We do some in-use duty cycle specific advantages in using natural gas. But if we're going to look at full support for natural gas as we look to the future and how the fleet will be exposed to these different technologies, we really need to address the life cycle issues associated with natural gas, in particular the leakage discussion that's been ongoing, and we really need to get an understanding of that, because that's going to affect how we look at not only tailpipe but longer-term GHG benefits. So with that, I conclude, Cliff, and we'll pass it to Mark.
Sorry, had mutes on. Thanks. Really appreciate that presentation. Before we move on, though, to Mark Walls, I just want to give a quick reminder to everybody to submit your questions for the moderated Q&A session that will take place after our last presenter. The Q&A little dialog box that's at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Just to submit a question, just write the question right there in that box, and it will come to us. We've got a few questions that have come in, but I'd really like to see quite a few more. I know that our 199 attendees have a lot more than just 4 questions. So without further ado, our next presenter is Mark Walls. He's a senior research engineer at the Southwest Research Institute. He was in the Engine, Emissions, and Vehicle Research Division. Mark has about 2 decades of experience working in test system development of engine facilities and alternative and advanced engine combustion techniques. Today's webinar, Mark is going to cover of heavy-duty natural gas engine technologies and the plans to make these engines even cleaner and more efficient. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Cliff. I appreciate the introduction. As Cliff said, my name is Mark Walls with Southwest Research Institute. Today I'm going to talk about the next generation natural gas engine. The presentation by talking about a program that we had with NREL, just a brief project overview with that. I'm going to move into SWRI's dedicated EGR concept and some thoughts on some of the things that we've seen throughout some of these projects. So the National Renewable Energy Laboratories Natural Gas Engine Vehicle Research and Development Demonstration Program has been a 2-year ongoing project in which we've developed an engine for the next generation natural gas engine. This has been sponsored by NREL, California Energy Commission, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and SoCal Gas. As slide. Brief project overview. We started with a 2010 U.S. certified production lean burn engine, and we add a few parts and pieces on there and to convert it to a cooled EGR stoichiometric operation with a 3-way catalyst. We did appropriate testing to make sure the engine was durable, and we integrated this engine into 3 different chassis that will be operating in a 1-year demonstration program for Los Angeles Transit. This is the starting point here. This is a 2010 Doosan 11.1 liter 6-cylinder engine, 220 kilowatts, 1,220 newton meters of torque. I mentioned earlier that it was a lean burn SC urea system, low energy ignition, low heads, 10:1 compression ratio, and certified to a 0.15 NOx and less than 10 ppm ammonia engine. So from that starting point, we converted the engine by changing quite a few different pieces on the engine. We look at the pistons. We up the compression ratio to 12:1, increase the squish on the piston to help charge motion in the cylinder to help burn the EGR now going in the engine, and added cooling to those pistons since our heat loading is now much higher. We gained the low swirl heads from the lean engine, and of course added the appropriate EGR cooler and valving to allow the EGR to come back into the intake system, and sent the appropriate sensors to monitor the EGR coming in. Also upped the ignition energy to help ignite the stressed mixture from the EGR coming in, and added knock and misfire detection to help us keep the engine at its most efficient point. This engine is now uprated from 220 kilowatts to 250 kilowatts, but also have a large increase in torque by about another 300 newton meters. Now, the estimated cert levels for this engine, we have not done the certification testing yet, but it is expected, and our preliminary testing has shown about a 0.05 NOx and less than 10 ppm ammonia. Currently, the 1 calibration engine, we're about 95% done with all the calibrations, working on some of the safeties and engine protections that go with a production engine, and looking at a NOx and ammonia trade-off to further look to, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. In addition, we have 4 durability engines running different tests to make sure we're going to make a full engine, and then finally we'll end up with 2 certification engines. 10 certification. Now, the bus that I mentioned that this engine is going to go in currently is running the Cummins Cummins Westport ISLG 8.9 liter, and this slide is just a kind of a quick comparison of what the Doosan engine will be replacing for this demonstration program. The torque is about 300 newton meters higher than the 8.9 liter. It run about 2% more efficient than the Cummins 8.9, and do this while making much lower NOx and CO. I'll move to SWRI's dedicated EGR concept. Previously, I was speaking about the NREL program. That was a low-pressure loop EGR system, and that worked very well, but it does have its limitations. So at the graph on the bottom, the y-axis is brake thermal efficiency of the engine versus the x-axis, which is EGR. If you follow the blue line coming at the bottom there, that is the low-pressure loop EGR. And you see as we add more EGR, the efficiency does increase up to a point which the efficiency starts to roll off. And what happens there is you run so much EGR that the combustion duration starts to get so long and efficiency would drop off and stability starts to drop off. So one solution that we're looking at is adding hydrogen in. So black dot, the black circle there, shows adding a little bit of hydrogen there, and that will shorten the combustion duration down and also increase combustion efficiency. As you add more hydrogen, that will allow us to push the EGR a little bit further and increase the brake thermal efficiency quite a bit more. So what are the pros and cons of running hydrogen in your engine? I mentioned it allows us to push a little more EGR and increase the efficiency. We can also get away with a lower energy ignition system or a less expensive ignition system. The flame speed in cylinder is increased by running hydrogen, which will help us improve the combustion efficiency and yield overall improved thermal efficiency of the engine. Downsides are that it can decrease the effective methane number of the natural gas. It can also negatively impact the volumetric efficiency and turbocharger efficiency if you have to ingest all this hydrogen coming in. Historically, hydrogen has been energy intensive, and sometimes that can outweigh the benefits of actually running hydrogen on the engine. So what is a dedicated EGR? What it is, if you look at the cartoon drawing on the right, is you take one or more cylinder of a multi-cylinder engine and you feed it right back into the intake of the engine. Now these two cylinders that I have shown on the right side, we'll call our dedicated cylinders. We'll run these cylinders rich. When we do this, we make hydrogen-rich and CO-rich exhaust that comes back around the engine and feeds all 6 cylinders. So now we have the hydrogen-enhanced combustion, and we're able to run the other 4 cylinders in such a way that we still have a stoichiometric exhaust, and we can utilize a 3-way catalyst. So external energy-intensive hydrogen rating equipment. It's all done in cylinder, very low cost. So some of the benefits of hydrogen-enhanced combustion, I mentioned all the hydrogens produced in cylinder. Allows us to accelerate the combustion and lower ignition requirement, and the combustion efficiency and stability are greatly improved by adding just a little bit of hydrogen that's produced in these cylinders. It's low complexity. Everything is generated from the 2 cylinders, and whatever you take in those 2 cylinders is what you get. And there's none of the EGR has to pass through the turbo machinery, so if there's any concerns about additional wear or corrosion into the turbo machinery, this is now bypassed. It also is more efficient than the already efficient low-pressure loop EGR, as I mentioned in the NREL program, and all the pollutants are fully controlled by the 3-way catalyst. What we're expecting as far as efficiency on the dedicated natural gas engine is at a minimum of 43%, which is up to maybe 4% better than the low-pressure loop EGR. So what are some of our thoughts? on the projects that we've seen. A lot of the focus is going to have to be on the cold start emissions. Look at the chart there. It shows our progression of calibration over time. The blue bars represent the hot start contribution of the FTP, which counts for 6/7 of the composite emissions. So at step 4, it shows that the hot start contribution of NOx is very close to zero, and 90% of the emissions that we're seeing on the engine mentioned previously is coming from the cold start, which is only 1/7 of the FTP. So to be able to combat this, we're going to focus on the cold start on another program that we have going on here. And we're going to look at things such as the closed-coupled catalyst or electrically heated catalyst, turbocharger bypassing, insulated exhaust, or lean-rich operation in which you run certain cylinders rich and certain cylinders lean during cold start to try to produce hydrogen and enable the catalyst to light off in a faster manner. I mentioned earlier about the NOx ammonia trade-off. The same calibrations, the steps 1 through 4, the reduction of NOx as we improve the calibration. Now, a takeaway from this is as we approach the near zero NOx level, we'll the ammonia increasing as that happens. So we're going to our focus right now is improvement in the transient control, try to get the NOx and the ammonia to the much lower level, maintain the near zero NOx, and keep the ammonia below 10 ppm. Other costs for us to minimize these excursions are looking at different hardware changes, such as multi-port injection or adding passive SCR or ammonia oxidation catalyst. And the dedicated EGR concept, we could see significant improvements with natural gas. The dedicated cylinders will generate a lot of hydrogen with natural gas due to the favorable hydrogen and carbon ratio. And with this, it should allow us to reduce the cold start emissions and catalyst light-off times. Also, the greenhouse gas emissions should be quite a bit lower. I mean, currently the low-pressure BGR engine shows about a 15% reduction at current efficiencies. As we move to more efficient systems, such as the dedicated EGR natural gas engine, we should show perhaps up to a 20% reduction in CO2 versus the diesel engine. This dedicated EGR concept is not necessarily a concept. We've actually successfully implemented it in light-duty side, as shown by the 2013 Buick Regal there that we have current Southwest and a successful program. And we hope to take the technology to a heavy 6-cylinder-like engine running on natural gas. Thank you very
much. Mark. I want to remind everybody to please submit your questions in the dialog box that you find on the lower right-hand side of your screen. We've got 203 attendees, and we have 12 questions. So I want to see at least another 180 questions being submitted. Our last presentation today is going to be from Stephen Patucha, Director of Product Management and Planning at Cummins Westport. He is directly involved with all stages of Cummins Westport's product development programs, from planning through development and demonstration and all the way through commercial launch. Today, Stephen is going to discuss his work to identify and prioritize technology research and development opportunities for Cummins Westport's natural gas engines. Stephen.
So I'm going to discuss CWI's approach to near zero NOx emissions. I'll start with a brief description of CWI and the natural gas engines that we produce. I'll provide a background on the historic emission requirements to show where we've come from and where we want to head. From that, I'll discuss how we intend to achieve a near zero NOx emissions, including the levers we intend to use and the associated trade-offs and challenges in getting there. CWI is a 50-50 joint venture between Westport and Cummins, with responsibility for natural gas engines in the size of 6 to 12 liters for on-highway applications. CWI's current lineup of natural gas engines include the ILG 8.9 liter, which was first released in 2007, meeting 2010 emissions regulations early. The ISX 12G, which is an 11.9 liter engine, which was released this past year, and currently working on an ISB 6.7G, which is a 6.7 liter engine that should start production late in 2015. All three of these engines share the same natural gas fuel system architecture, consists of stoichiometric combustion, exhaust gas recirculation, spark ignition, and a three-way catalyst after treatment. These are dedicated natural gas engines and can be mated with either CNG or LNG fuel storage system on the vehicle. A quick down of the CWI combustion technology, just to show, let me make sure I'm right slide here. Sorry, I might be one slide behind. Sorry about that. A rundown on the CWI combustion technology. We start with traveling through the charge air cooler to the engine air intake, where it's controlled by a throttle plate. At the same time, the natural gas is metered into the air intake along with exhaust gas when cooled through the EGR cooler. This air-fuel EGR mixture then flows past the intake valves into the combustion chamber. And there, a spark plug is used to ignite the mixture, and the exhaust is cleaned further via a three-way catalyst, so the tailpipe emissions meet regulations. Make sure we're on 7 there. We the EPA requirements we faced over the years, with the main focus having been on NOx and particulate matter. PM was drastically reduced by 90% near zero levels in 2007. The focus shift to NOx, with over an 80% reduction between 2007 and 2010 to the current emissions limits of 0.2 grams NOx per horsepower hour. This reduction required the introduction of after-treatment technology, which was selective catalytic reduction SR systems in the diesel engines, and for the CWI natural gas engine, which uses stoichiometric combustion, it was able to use a three-way catalyst. Again, the three-way catalyst needs to have or can't have excess oxygen. It needs to be low in oxygen environment there, and that's why that stoichiometric combustion is needed, where diesel engines are lean burn, excess oxygen, and their only alternative for after treatment then is the selective catalytic reduction SCR system. Combustion improvements were also utilized with the CWI products to achieve 2010 emissions levels, and moving away from the lean burn to stoichiometric combustion. So as we see on the graph there, we can show which technologies were used to achieve the various emissions requirements there, moving from lean burn to our current stoichiometric spark-ignited product. Now, as we take that small little green box on the left side, and that's where we are today, and blow that up for the chart on the right side, and this is showing where we want to head, and we need a further reduction of over 9% or 80% to get down to 0.02 grams NOx levels. You can see in the gray bar there where we are currently at with our ISMG engine. So it is certified below the current standard, but still has a fair way to go down to what we would class as near zero levels. Now, with current NOx levels already low, we don't have the luxury of introducing a single technology that lowers NOx in all operating conditions. We need to target on operating areas where the highest NOx are formed. Two of the areas are immediately after coasting or motoring, which is estimated to produce about 6% of the NOx emissions in an FTP test, federal test procedure test. The second operating area is upon initial operation, which is estimated to represent about 30% of composite NOx emissions in a cold FTP cycle. During coasting motoring events, the fuel is typically shut off while the air continues to pass through the engine and through the catalyst. That air passing through the catalyst oxidizes it and cools the catalyst, and this results in poor NOx conversion efficiency, and then the fuel's turned back on. That catalyst isn't operating at the right temperature. That poor efficiency then produces or allows the production of higher NOx levels right after that motoring event. Operating areas in mind, there are a number of levers that we can pull to lower NOx emissions. What we're focusing on, and one of the main ones that's quite obvious, is improvements to the catalyst after treatment with wash coat formulations to improve the low temperature operation efficiency. Besides the wash coat, the overall size of the catalyst can be addressed to convert more NOx at all conditions there. As mentioned, during coasting and motoring, when the fuel is shut off, the catalyst is cooled by the continued flow of air. To help reduce this cooling, it is possible to reroute that air and keep the catalyst closer to optimal operating temperatures. Another lever that can be used to reduce NOx is the improved air-fuel sensing. Both more accurate lambda sensing and over a wider band can be used to air-fuel control. There are limitations with the current oxygen sensor under situations where it's desirable to run slightly rich of stoichiometric, reduce the catalyst quickly for improved NOx conversion efficiency. The sensor isn't able to accurately control the air-fuel ratio outside of a narrow band near stoichiometric. It's really good at saying if you're in that, if you are stoichiometric or not, but not too good at setting exact levels once you're outside that narrow band. The location of the sensors can also be optimized for improved responsiveness, and that's to turn on and off fueling quicker, especially after these events such as the motoring event there, and keep the performance where we want it, but really optimizing and lowering the emissions. Fuel improvements is another lever that can be utilized. Currently, the fuel is metered in the air intake stream, and then this air-fuel mixture is delivered to all cylinders. Multi-port fuel injection would improve fuel transport delay times, as well as allow for improved controls relative to which cylinder you're looking at. And that come into play as we look to address fuel efficiency improvements as well. Now, as expected, reduction of NOx doesn't come easily, and it doesn't come for free. There are trade-offs that have to be considered and addressed in order to continue to produce a reliable and durable engine with the performance that it's expected by the market. Typically, as the NOx emissions are lowered, the fuel consumption is increased due to the need to run richer to maintain the high efficiency of the catalyst, keep that catalyst hot. Focusing on NOx reduction, the drop in fuel economy is likely to range in 3 to 5% for normal operation and could hit as high as 10% over the entire FTP cycle. So if you did nothing else than address NOx, lower it, and not look at any other part of the system, you come with a pretty substantial fuel economy penalty. The market won't tolerate a drop in the fuel economy going forward. And they'll expect natural gas engines a continuous improvement, much like we've seen with diesel engines improving their fuel economy since 2010, since introducing SCR systems. The other side of this is the greenhouse gas rules. They came into play last year for the early entry this year, and then looking at 2016 and 17 with further reductions. The reductions mean, again, you can't just reduce NOx and have a penalty. you have to improve it not only to keep it the same for current, but you'll need to improve it even further to meet those 2016 and 2017 standards. So as the technology is developed to decrease NOx to near zero levels, fuel economy improvement technology also has to be developed, has to be into the plans right from the start. Another that we see is between NOx and ammonia. Stoichiometric engines operating three-way catalyst control typically exhibit a steep trade-off between reducing NOx and increasing ammonia. Ammonia present in the exhaust stream of stoichiometric combustion, upstream of the three-way catalyst. Ammonia is generally created by the three-way catalyst under fuel-rich conditions. So while NOx is primarily converted to nitrogen and water and carbon dioxide, hydrogen is produced from the available water. This hydrogen may then be converted to ammonia, especially under fuel-rich conditions, which are necessary to aggressively reduce the NOx. The formation of ammonia is addressed through improved air fuel controls and carefully managing the fuel-rich operation. So much of the levers that we've talked about previous will help us also to keep ammonia levels down below, and certainly the 10 parts per million is one of those targets that we're aiming to keep below. Now, there are systems that could be added to the engine, such as additional SCR system or an ammonia catalyst. Those take up space. They're also very expensive, so those aren't the first choice as far as approach, but to improve it through air fuel control. Now, there are a number of additional challenges which need to be considered during the development of technology and products to lower NOx. Many of the levers used to improve fuel efficiency, such as increasing engine compression ratio, they'll stress the engine more and can negatively impact engine durability. These be addressed through design, such as material changes and control logic, but typically come with an increase in cost, and that cost then ends up being passed on to the end user, to the fleets, with increased product costs, unfortunately. When the engines are certified for emissions, they're relatively new with new components. So it's one thing to pass an emissions test with new parts right off the bat. It's a bigger challenge to ensure that that engine will continue to pass the emissions levels throughout the emissions warranty period, through the life of the engine there. So, it appears that just a 90% reduction is needed to reduce NOx from its current level at 0.2 grams to 0.0 grams. You actually need a larger than 90% reduction so that you can account for the degradation loss during the life of the system to maintain that 0.2 grams or lower throughout. So that's going to be a big challenge. A challenge that we're going to face is the onboard diagnostics, or OBD, requirements come into play for the alternative fuels in 2018. And they require onboard detection when the emissions fall outside of the emissions limits. So now not only must the engine and aftertreatment be improved to produce almost near zero NOx emissions, but we have to improve the onboard diagnostics to be able to detect not only that near zero level, but an even smaller level and change in that to see when something may be wrong and notify the operator. So this is another area that's going to take significant effort development. Now, near zero NOx emissions has been the focus. We can't forget about the current and future more stringent greenhouse gas emission regulations. The GHG emissions is tied directly to fuel economy, and therefore is set to the same NOx versus fuel economy trade-offs that we discussed earlier. OI engines currently meet the 2013 GHG requirements. The ISX 12G will need some improvements in the tractor segment to meet the 2016-2017 list there. So again, as we look ahead, we kind of double the improvement in fuel efficiency, one to counteract the effect from reducing NOx, but as well the secondary to further reduce or consumption and increase fuel economy to meet the GHG limits. So I can conclude just to say that, even though NOx levels have already been reduced by 96% over the past 20 years, a further 90% reduction is needed to achieve near zero levels of 0.02 gram horsepower hour levels. Near zero NOx emission levels are achievable through technology and product development. The targets by the operating areas where the highest levels of NOx are formed. Levers and trade-offs to achieve the near zero NOx levels are understood. We still understand too that it's going to take significant technology and product development to meet these results and continue to produce the expected viable and durable product that the market requires. What we feel EWI's current stoichiometric cooled EGR spark ignited products are positioned well to be the basis for these future near zero NOx products. And very much both G&A and Southern Cal Gas for having us all here to present our advancements in this technology to this forum.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So now we will begin with our Q&A. We've got a lot of questions. Very good questions. But as the moderator, I have the prerogative to start with a question of my own. And Stephen, I direct this to you. Recently, there was a recall of natural gas engines. Could you please provide us with some background on what that recall was all about? What was the issue, and what's being done about it?
Certainly, thanks, Cliff. We've had a recall for ISLG and our ISX-12G engines, and the recall came about from an issue we discovered where in sub-zero temperatures and really cold climates, and over this past winter, we saw that throughout North America here, where condensation is forming ice on and around our intake manifold pressure temperature sensor. And that ice is causing the control system in the engine to improperly fuel there, and that's resulting in some fires, some diagnostic fault codes coming up, as well as some elevated exhaust temperatures. So the fix for that is an updated calibration. Fix is out. The Cummins distributors, dealers, have that ready to go onto all of the engines. So Cummins is working to notify all of the owners and have them bring those engines in and have that new calibration put in place and corrected.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Got a couple of questions for you. One that actually is going to be familiar to you. But first is the engines that you were showing in your presentation. Were they CNG powered, LNG powered, or does it not matter?
Not matter, but in the instances here, they were CNG powered.
Mark, what is squish?
That's a good question. Squish is the area between the piston and the head, that as the piston comes up to top dead center, it squishes the air-fuel mixture center of the combustion chamber and creates charge motion. Helps the EGR and air-fuel mixture burn faster.
I hope that the participants who asked that question were listening, so that you know what squish is. So let's see. A lot of good questions. Here's one I think that everybody might be able to participate in. And I think that Stephen, you might have addressed this somewhat in your presentation. But what kind of trade-offs might we expect manufacturers to make below NOx and higher efficiency, lower GHG performance?
Certainly.
Go ahead.
From an engineering standpoint, you wish you were given some trade-offs that you're allowed to sacrifice one for the other. But with both the goal for low NOx and still regulations that are increasingly stringent on fuel economy, we're going to be faced with trying to meet both of those. As there's always a continued market push for increased fuel economy to help with reducing operating costs, and then for natural gas engines to help with the payback of equipment that is more expensive than diesel. So I think it's really pushing the technology and product development to achieve both of those. While we say it's a trade-off, we still have to find other ways, and it's going to look at technology, whether it's multi-port injection, advanced combustion. Mark mentioned the dedicated EGR, and others might have some additional items to add to that. It's going to take a lot of advancement there to increase fuel economy as well.
Mark, Matt, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Some of our experience here, we've seen as far as the hot start and hot operation, the trade-off in fuel efficiency is maybe not quite as big of a penalty. It's maybe not a trade-off. What we've seen is really going to focus back to the cold start and using some of that fuel energy to get the catalyst quickly. So if you do see a trade-off, at least it's my feeling that you'd see most of it in the cold start portion.
Cliff, this is Matt. Let me add that I think I see a lot of our colleagues from ARB on the webinar, so happy that they're, and from the public policy side, the state has chosen to implement these option NOx standards, which should help the user decide, does it make sense for them to use a vehicle that gives them an economic benefit, but also the manufacturer to produce an engine that has, the for incentives with this lower NOx standard. So I think, it depends on what that trade-off is and what the incentives are on the other side.
Related to this, Mark, Stephen talked about these trade-offs in the Cummins Westport engine. Does the Doosan engine have a similar issue, similar trade-off between NOx reduction and fuel efficiency?
I've seen small trade-offs, but nothing significant on start side. Again, focusing back on the cold start, we do see the trade-off. With air-fuel ratio control, especially in the transient regime, we've seen too much of a penalty.
Now, on that cold start issue, where you're finding the majority of your current emissions profile, your current NOx emissions, I noticed that in Stephen's presentation, he also kind of highlighted those aspects of their duty cycle that they needed to focus on. How do those two compare? Stephen, where you feel like you need to focus your energies on, and Mark, where you feel like you need to focus your emission reduction targets on.
Mark, based upon the graph that was shown there, we have the hot start down to around 0.01, and 90% being percent of the remaining composite NOx. A clear path that we have to focus on the cold start to get down to the near zero NOx emissions levels.
And this is Stephen. We showed, I showed in my presentation, was about 30% or up to 30% of the NOx in the initial cold operation there, and with better air fuel control, we feel we can tackle that area, get that catalyst heated up quicker, so it's more efficient. And then with other areas too, of improving the catalyst composition so that it can handle and become efficient at the low temperatures. Will address that cold start. So that's one of the two areas, and then the other is of our right after coasting motoring, where you do cool off as per se the catalyst. So those are our focused areas as well.
Mark, on that research that you're doing on that Doosan engine, one of our questions is: are the fruits of this Southwest Research Institute program being made available to manufacturers other than Doosan?
Absolutely, they are. So Southwest Research it's a consulting company, develop technology, and we work with engine manufacturers. Anybody is welcome to come to Southwest, and we'd be happy to work with them on it.
You got to draw your answers out longer. You know? Okay. Well, we got a lot of questions here. Here's an interesting one. The DGR approach. I think this is directed at you. Does this DEGR approach also require transmission changes that complement the technology changes to the engine and performance requirements?
For the heavy application, the engine speed not run any differently than it's in the standard diesel or natural gas application. Back to the light duty industry, we have passed down speeded engine, in which case we would need a change in transmission. For this case, no, the trend will remain the same.
I think this question is probably directed to all of our presenters. How sensitive will these new near zero emission heavy duty natural gas engines be gas quality? And by gas quality, I think that we can refer to a lot of different issues. Higher ethane content, higher WOBE. In some instances, maybe higher different kinds of gas quality. What are sensitivities are there?
This is Mark here. Along the lines, in terms of emissions, we're going to see any effect due to fuel quality. We're running EGR. It's going to run stoichiometric through the three catalyst, so we would see little to no effect there. In terms of performance efficiency, is probably where you would see a hit. I don't know if you're seeing earlier, but there is a knock and misfire detection sensors on these engines, and we push them to the limit. So if you run a lower quality fuel, you might into a knocking condition in which timing has to be retarded. And you're going to take a penalty of efficiency when you do that. That's performance.
I just wanted to do that. One of the levers for improved fuel efficiency is going to be increasing compression ratio, which will rely on better knock detection to operate closer to that or detect scenarios where it could be damaging to the engine there. So in the area, it will be, again, more sensitive, but as Mark said, affecting the end emissions, it'll affect the performance more likely.
Yeah, and Clint, I'm sure SoCalGas is going to ensure that the quality of their product meets the ARB transportation fuel spec as well as the PUC WOBE index.
Okay. So Matt, since you've made yourself vault here for a question, I think one is best directed at you. How will biofuel, and in this instance, the asker of the question is referring to natural gas and diesel. how will biofuel play in the future in the South Coast Air Quality Management District? What do you see as the current and future emission requirements for biofuel vehicles?
Yeah,
I don't know if they mean biofuel or if they mean dual fuel, but
so we say that we're kind of fuel agnostic, right? So but we're not emissions agnostic. So we need to make sure that whatever fuel is being used in the vocation and the technology gets the lowest possible emissions. So zero is the best, but if you can't get zero, that's why we're pushing for this power plant equivalent, or what we're terming near zero. So we'll take all comers if they can ensure that it's not impacting air quality adversely.
Okay. Another interesting question here for Mark and Steve. Are the natural gas engines typically being designed for retrofit applications? I think. Well, let me paraphrase what I think the questioner wants to know here, and that is, are natural gas engines that are found in fleets today can be retrofitted to result in these near zero emission performance, or require new iron?
My feeling is it's going to require new engines. It's very challenging to go back on old hardware and improve that cost effectively. It's one thing to have improved controls and download new software, but all of the sensors, the materials that you may have to have made adjustments to other parts to compensate, that will be a challenge to do it effectively, cost effectively for the fleet. So the best approach is forward with new engines.
Well, the engine, the Doosan engine we're developing at Southwest, the NREL program, I mentioned earlier, we are replacing the engine in the existing running bus. A piece of that program is to work with the manufacturers to integrate it into their systems or their new offering. But I guess to answer the question maybe in another way, retrofitting the technology to an existing engine that's already in a vehicle is something that we are not looking into, and maybe might be cost prohibitive.
Thank you. There was a question that was directed towards me, and that question was, I think, in the context of Pathways research that we did. Have we considered the results of using renewable natural gas, also known as RNG, in these vehicles, as compared to using conventional, what we know as terrestrial gas? And for our listeners, renewable natural gas is methane that is produced from biological sources. It could be a landfill gas. It could be digester gas. It's essentially gas that's created using organic material, and as it decomposes, it produces methane. And indeed, we actually have been looking at the benefits of using renewable natural gas. There's considerable potential in the state of California for the production of renewable methane, and when you do so, you basically eliminate the greenhouse gas footprint of vehicles. There are some manufacturers, some fuel providers, such as Clean Energy, that are actually providing to some of their customers who seek it a renewable natural gas. And we know that there are new initiatives that are being pursued by the gas industry to integrate biogas into their pipes, even to the point where someday they may be able to claim through the right combination of biogas and hydrogenization and terrestrial gas that their gas has zero greenhouse gas footprint. So there's a lot of work that's being done in this particular area on renewable natural gas. Let's see. Our next question. Here's a good question. I guess it would also be answered by me. Is the power plant equivalent number based on today's power plants in 2014, or the power plant emission projections for some future year? And the answer to that is that the power plant equivalent number is based on the emissions rates that are achieved by today's high efficiency, low emission, combined cycle natural gas power plants, the cleanest power plants that are deployed today, and that meet the toughest emission standards that are currently books. We know at this point in time the no additional or future, not to say that there wouldn't be, but right now the emission standards for power plants are pretty tough, particularly here in California. And of course, the power plant emissions that we're referring to are California-based power plants. That is, however, distinct from, as Matt pointed out, the total the grid, which of course the grid has considerable zero emission sources, and what we're saying is what these future natural gas near zero emission natural gas heavy duty engines will be able to achieve is power plant equivalent emission reductions, which get us to that 90% reduction that both Matt's and my presentation demonstrated are what's necessary to meet the reduction targets that are currently on the books for California. Backing up a little bit, Steve, to the very first question. So you're dealing with this center issue for ISLG and the ISX. So, will the lessons that you're learning be applied to the development of your new engine, say like your new 6.7 liter engine?
Absolutely, and that's not the only case where we've taken what we've learned from the existing engines and throughout. So any time that we see a challenge out in the field there, we'll try to make sure we fix it there and improve it on upcoming as well.
Okay, thank you. There's great questions here, so I have to apologize ahead of the close, which is going to be in about 6 minutes. That won't be able to get to all of them, but I think here's a good one. How will and this is directed at all of our panelists, how will the fuel economy of these advanced natural gas engines compared to those of these newer diesel engines that are coming out that have significantly improved fuel economy?
From the WI standpoint, using stoichiometric cooled our spark-ignited engines, one of the challenges that's faced is the spark-ignited engines typically use a throttle, and that throttle adds some losses in the cycle there. And so right off the bat, just the difference in combustion puts the spark-ignited engines at a slight penalty there to what is currently used in the direct injection on the diesel. So it's a challenge to meet exact diesel economy numbers. You'll see both has been improving steadily since 2010, and I expect natural gas, it has improved and it will continue to improve, but we may not match diesel fuel economy exactly.
Mark, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Stephen on that. I mean, currently natural gas, we're in the 40 to 41, maybe 42% thermal efficiency point, where a diesel engine might be upwards of 46 or so. But we're going different technologies such as the dedicated EGR, and we hope to prove that we can approach these diesel efficiencies, not match them here shortly. So there is internal research program going on here, so I'd be share that information as we progress on the project.
Thank you. I guess this is also directed at all of our presenters. What do you see as the most challenging impediment to widespread use of near zero emission heavy duty trucks in California? And what do we need to do in order to overcome those impediments? Why don't we toss that one to Matt first?
Thanks, although I thought I heard Stephen jumping up. So
yeah, I know, because you're down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, playing in this game a long time, and you know the answer as well as probably anybody on this webinar. It's really, you mentioned what the great Carl Meyer said. It's the trucks, but it's really also the market. We've got to make sure that the developing market, there's market pull, not just technology or regulatory push. So I think Stephen, coming from an OE perspective, he's very concerned about what the market will withstand or demand, and make sure they have a durable product. Rightly so, but we've got to incent this market to make sure that it's not just a Southern California pocket that is demanding this cleaner technology or these cleaner technologies, but we keep hearing they need demand from all of the goods movement corridors across the United States. It can't just be a Southern California. I think we've got to set the right market incentives, the right regulatory and policies, such that this is not just started here, but proliferates throughout the country.
Simon, I interrupted you, please.
No, I thought that answer was well put. We are concerned what the market will want as a product. We can design the best technology into a product, and if it sells, we won't be around long to continue on with it. But how do we get that pulled through? How do we get people to realize that that's important, and just for area such as Southern California throughout? I think a combination of increasing the stringency of the standards, but not dictating the technology that's needed. Let the market decide which technology is the best to meet our end goals, and for the initial launch of those products in there, some help is always needed. Get those vehicles out there, prove to people that they aren't losing out on the other aspects that they rely on, whether it's the durability of the engine, the ability of the engine to make them money. These are, all of these engines are going in to keep people's businesses running. All of that has to be shown to them, and only the early demonstration products help, as well as then in some ways some of the accelerated development of the commercialization and getting those incentivized would be very helpful.
Ruff, thank you. And I think with that, we've run out of time. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to end it there. I apologize that we didn't have time to address all the really terrific questions that we received today. We had more than 200 people who participated in this webinar. Illustrates the high degree of interest in this topic and in similar topics, and impels us to plan more similar seminars. I want to thank Matt and Stephen and Mark very, very much for their participation in this webinar. Outstanding presentations, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'll remind everybody that this webinar was recorded, and we will make it available for replay via a link. Will be emailed to everybody who participated and everybody who RSVP'd. Also, as a reminder, please complete the quick survey that's going to pop up once we close the webinar window. We really appreciate your feedback, and we use it in order to continually improve our webinar series. Again, thanks to our presenters. I'd also like to thank Charlotte and Melissa, my staff, for making this possible and hard work that you did in order to bring us to this excellent webinar here today. Thanks again to everybody joining us, and I hope that you have a great rest of the week. Thank you.